Hello, this is Luke Turner, and we're back with another episode of Building an Exercise Tracking Web App from Scratch. Let's get started with the usual steps. Run the database, then we run the client-side code bundler, and then in a new tab, we run the server. Okie doke. Then we can open that in our web browser. And here we are. So when we wrapped up yesterday, there was a couple kind of outstanding things that we had been working on. One of them was the Alpine JS front end shift, where I was exploring with installing Alpine JS and using it as an alternative to Datastar. I felt that Datastar was a bit too opinionated, and in particular, it really struggled with having like error alerting type stuff if we weren't using server-sent events, which I don't really want to use, partly because I don't understand them super well because I've never used them before, but also that just requires a big shift in the app. I would rather use a front-end dependency that just works better with HTTP type stuff, I guess. So that's kind of the idea of using Alpine here. Also, Alpine, I feel like, is just a bit more robust and kind of well-known. So one of the things about Datastar is there's some things I sort of struggled to understand because either they weren't in the docs or it's just sort of implicit behavior. Whereas with Alpine, I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be a bit more intuitive, a bit more kind of normal. But we'll see. Anyway, so that was one of the things. The other thing was fixing the deployments. So if you recall, maybe at the first half of the last stream, one of the things we did is we actually deployed our app to set.luketurner.org. So this is a deployed version of the app. And we were running into problems with this where when I signed in, I would be getting 500 errors. And navigating to different pages, it's like there were errors in the logs about being unable to connect to the database. As you can see, though, I fixed that off stream. And the connecting to the database error was a bit of a red herring. I'll explain sort of the problem and the solution here because it's kind of interesting. So first of all, the app is deployed on Fly, right? And this is that app. Now, I knew that it was working locally, so you figure there's something wrong with the deployment or some difference with the deployment that was causing it to not work in the cloud. And so I tried a few things about like connecting to the database, making sure like, are the migrations all run? Looking at the logs for anything suspicious. One of the things was looking at the metrics for the service. And I was interested about two things, really. One is the load average, and it's not showing up anymore, but the load average was quite high. We should see this start to populate now because I actually have been browsing the page. But the load average, it was like 1 plus, which means that the VM was using at least one of its shared cores, I think. I don't really know how that works in shared core land, but normally a load average of 1 means that like one core is being used, which is obviously way more than we should be needing. I also noticed that the memory usage was quite high. It's higher than it is here. It was actually right up near the total. Like you can see the memory total is 207.5 megabytes and the memory used was like 196 point something or something like that. So there was only a few megabytes of memory left basically. And so I had the hypothesis then that the reason the app was slow and sometimes timed out and things like that was actually because it was running out of memory, not anything to do with the database at all. Because sometimes it seemed like it would work and sometimes it didn't. So I just added some swap. That was sort of the solution here. And I've got the commit for that. Not actually committed, but it's in the repo here. So we're adding 256 megabytes of swap to this VM. And we could also bump the size. Like if I switch this to 2x, then we would actually have 512 megabytes of actual RAM, as well as 2 shared cores. But I think swap is fine. This app basically, because it doesn't need a lot of performance, and we're not really expecting that much traffic either, I don't really mind if some memory is moved to swap. We're probably not even going to notice the difference. And the swap is free, so that's kind of the advantage there. I don't have to pay for a larger size. I am a bit surprised we're actually using as much memory as we are. I mean, like 170.9 plus 44.2. That's kind of a lot of memory for a server that's not doing anything. Don't really know what's up with that. My guess is that it's either overhead from Drizzle, the ORM, or from Better Auth, the library, or both. They might be maintaining like separate database connection pools with multiple open connections and things like that. I don't really know. But the actual server, shouldn't really be using that much memory, one would think. Not that 256 megabytes is a lot of memory, but okay, so that's that. I just wanted to share that context, I guess. Now I fixed that off stream because I wasn't sure if there might be some kind of passwords I needed to change or anything like that for the database connectivity. But like I said, that ended up being a red herring. So we could commit this, and I will commit this. But first I'm going to unstage this work in progress commit here, or undo it. So undoing a commit is basically taking the changes that were in that commit and putting them back into your working tree, like as a staged, what do we call this? Your staging zone. And so I'm going to unstage all those. I'm going to stage this fly toml, and I'm going to call this add swap to fly deployment. Okay, so that fixes that issue. The other thing that I want to work on today is the front end Alpine stuff. So this commit, the reason that previously I had this commit committed, but with WIP at the beginning, which is kind of a note to self that this is not a fully built out commit. That's what I do when I'm making a commit locally, sort of for version tracking, but I'm not going to push that commit. I don't push WIP commits. That's kind of the rule of thumb. So that way I can feel safe to then rebase that, or in this case, like undo it, change the history without affecting other users because I didn't push it. Anyway, so just a mnemonic, but kind of the idea now is we need to remember what we were doing. Let's see here. Okay, so what I do remember is we wanted to add error handling. And so if we look at the layout, error handling for XHR requests, for HX requests, where if we don't get a response or we get an error response back, a little pop-up comes up in the app to let the client know, or the user know, hey, we weren't able to update the server. So we added this chunk here, which is like the notification that appears, and it's using this $store.error store. And that store is defined up here as like a global piece of data store. The reason it's global is because we're only going to really be using that to render this probably, but we might actually use that for other parts of the page. And we also are going to need to be able to set that value from basically any AJAX request. So it's not localized to a specific section of the page. It's sort of an app global thing. So what other changes did we make? Here's where we were testing it out, it looks like, with this new etFetch function, which we're defining down here. And then we installed Alpine. Okay, pretty simple. So let's actually go work on this etFetch function a little bit more. So kind of the idea here is this function, I want to make it as simple as possible to send requests to the backend from within like a click handler. Because with Alpine as well as with Datastar, these click handlers are defined in the actual JavaScript, or pardon me, in the actual like HTML. So let's see. Just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about and to make sure that I'm thinking about it right, let's check out the docs here. Docs. So really we're going to want to do, like say something changes or somebody clicks a button, we're going to want to be able to send backend requests with like a relatively short function. And so I'm kind of thinking about this here. So we know that we can debounce these event handlers. Okay, and that can be, so like this is a good example where we're debouncing an input event handler. That's a lot like what we have in our today page. Okay. Probably don't need to worry too much about those other things. But anyway, so that's kind of what we're defining this function for. And I just called it etFetch for like exercise tracker fetch. Thinking about it, I guess since we're now calling the app set, we would probably call it like set fetch. Or we could actually change this to set. And then put it in there. Set fetch, set fetch. Okay. And then if I search for exercise tracker and replace that with set, Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Alrighty. So now kind of what we're going to want to do, if we go back to, let's say the today page, say somebody changes the value in this select. We're going to have something where it's like set.fetch. The first parameter is the method. The second parameter is the URL. The third parameter is going to need to be some way of describing what we want to send to the server. Okay, and I'm putting that in pretty vague terms here. So the simplest option is to send like a JSON object in here, and that JSON object gets sent to the server. So maybe that's kind of what I'll do. And then if we want to change that API, we can change it. But let's say we're setting a JSON or sending a JSON object. And in this case, probably the keys are going to be whatever we want them to be. And the values are going to be either just a JavaScript value or like an Alpine signal type of thing. So how does that work with Alpine? Like if I want to see the property of something that's bound, maybe we can just do this and it'll work magically. If not, we might have to use the data thing. Let's see. So let's actually not do this in the select because that it's in mixin. So using it in the mixin kind of adds a layer of complexity that I don't want to think about quite yet. Instead, let's actually just put it right on one of these inputs. So these are for weight and distance. I'm going to do like an X on one now, as well as a data on. And then we'll get rid of the data on once we're done writing the X on one. So X on colon input. And then we would do dot debounce. And 250 milliseconds by default, that seems fine. But previously I had it at 500, so I'm going to keep going with that. Dot debounce dot 500 milliseconds. Okay. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use that set dot fetch. And it's going to do a post to the sets with the set ID. And it's going to have so there's kind of two approaches here, just to talk through what I'm thinking at the moment. So previously we used this content type form functionality in DataStar, which was kind of convenient, even if I didn't really like the fact that it was tied to forms. But basically it would be sending all of the signals within this form, this thing, or no, this one here, at once, based on the names of those parameters or signals. So we could like emulate that behavior here and send everything for the set all at once per request, or we could just send the field that changed. Just sending the field that changed is simpler on the front end, but slightly more complicated on the back end. And there might be some synchronization questions involved with that as well. I feel like sending all of the fields is ideal, but will require us to think a bit about how we actually bind these. So what we're going to want to send here is an object called like set. Set.id. Or no, that goes there. So basically what we're sending is this whole set object that's located in the sets object at the given set ID. And I guess that wouldn't be string. Or yeah, no. I'm just confusing myself with the formatting. Okay. So if we do that, then we would have a data thingy. And maybe we should do it like this. Okay, so let's, inside this form.grid, we could add like X data. And this would be set, right? Can I just do that? I don't know. Let's actually try that and see what that looks like here. So let's get rid of that other tab so I don't confuse myself constantly. So I guess I've got to add a new set. And now this form, you can see the data is that whole set object. So now that should be available. And so actually I would be referencing that as is there a way for me to reference like the root? Is it this? No. I mean, dollar data is probably the thing, I guess. So like, let's go down here and say, for example, this would just be dollar data. Oops. Dollar data. And let's actually see what that does. Let's comment this one out. Let's just get rid of it. Okay. So this is going to be run on changes to weight or distance parameters. So if I go here and I do 1, 2, 3, no, 1, 2, 3. So it did a thing. What did it do? So if we look at the network tab, sent off a request. The payload is that set, which is pretty sweet. A problem that I kind of foresee is like if I have multiple X datas bound though, it's going to return all of those. So really I want this set to be like wrapped in an object here, I think. Set plus set, even though it looks really weird. Like that. And so then this would be just set. So now, 1, 2, 3, the payload, okay, it's not anything. If we look at the form, set object, oh dear. I have to do like JSON.stringify. Set. Kind of a nuisance. Beep, doot, doot, doot. Uncaught error. Set.fetch is not a. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so we're running into a problem where this set is now being, whatever the word is, shadowed by that other set declaration. Mr. Mugame, what is pug? What the hell is pug? I guess I don't need to censor you. Pug is a templating language for writing HTML. It's meant to be like a shorter way of writing HTML instead of writing all the elements by hand. It uses indentation to indicate where elements end instead of having a start and an end tag for the element. And it has a bunch of things built in for like writing JavaScript in your template in order to do things dynamically, right? For server-side rendering. That's Pug. Yeah. Basically, because we're rendering this app on the server side, I'm using Pug instead of using something like React or whatever, which would be more of a client-side thing, although of course it's available on the server as well. The syntax needs some getting used to. Yeah, you know, this is the most complicated app I've built using Pug, and it's really not something I would recommend at this point, but I am kind of used to it myself, so I'm just kind of plugging away. If we look at something like the layout page, it might look a little bit better. This is like sort of when you're writing plain HTML with Pug. So we've got, we can kind of easily define our elements, and it's got shorthand things for defining classes and stuff. What we're running into on like this page here that's kind of a nightmare is we've got JavaScript with the Alpine.js library, and we're calling that, or we're like composing these JavaScript strings in Pug by embedding server-side values into those strings. So it's like generating the strings based on the parameters that are being passed into the view. And it makes things really just kind of annoying sometimes to write with these strings and stuff. But that's sort of the idea. This is one of those apps where it's server-side rendered, and then the client has like JavaScript added to here and there. But it's not like it won't render without JavaScript. But it's fast. What's fast? Server-side rendering? If so, I definitely agree. Okay. So the problem I was running into here, though, is this set thing, which I'm actually just going to switch to underscore set. And then if I do like set dot underscore set dot, yeah, I made a lot of noise for myself here, but we're going to fix this one. We're going to fix this one. And this one. And this one. And this one. Okay. Yes. Yeah, server-side rendering is fast. Yeah, I like it a lot. Although, with my experience here, if I was to do server-side rendering, again, like I've done that with Next.js in the past, and that felt a lot easier just because I'm more familiar with it. Vibe coding or actually building from scratch? Building from scratch. This is AI free. I actually have been experimenting a fair bit with using some of the like agentic LLM tools, like Klein, Copilot, Cody, I guess. But I don't really want to stream that because it just feels like it defeats the purpose. Like if I'm watching somebody stream, it's because I want to see what they're doing and how they're going to build an app, not how some AI is going to spit something out and watch them click OK a bunch of times. So that's kind of my planning here. I want to be able to explain why things are the way they are and stuff instead of just like, well, that's what the AI spat out. Okay. The other thing is I'm kind of using some less common libraries, less common. I mean, this whole Pug thing that we were just talking about is not super common. So the vibe coding stuff often works the best when you are actually like using super mainstream tools, at least in my experience. Yes, no vibe coding, but we're still vibing. That's right. This is the Pug vibe. It might not be a good vibe, but it's what we've got. Okay, so I think that should work now. So now if we do like 1, 2, 3 here and see what we're getting sent over the network. So we've got our request payload. It's got the right values in it. It doesn't need that user. But actually that might give me an error. Invalid type path body exercise. Okay, so the complaint here is the exercise object is an object, but the server is expecting a string. certainly that's annoying. One thing I can do is either replace that object with a string, like with the ID on the client, or I could have the server support both methods. I might just do that on the client for now, though. So like if we, well, I don't know. I don't know if Pug is going to let me do this. Let's see. So if I do like set like exercise is set.exercise.id dot set, is that going to work? Let's just change something and see what it sends again. Oh, right. Got to put this first. Seems like it did work, though, in the sense that we're not actually getting a syntax error from Pug, which is what I was worried about. You've never heard of Pug before. Yeah, Pug is like an old, I mean, it's, it's been around for a while. It's an HTML templating library. I'm using it with Express, but it was like the new hotness probably like 15 years ago. Yeah, this is a workout site. So it's like basically the person can go in and manage and create exercises, and you can have these different parameters on them. Like you can say this exercise, we want to record a weight. This other exercise, we want to record duration. This one has all of them selected because I'm using it for testing, but that's kind of the idea. And then on the today page, you can record different values for that exercise, create multiple sets, and track them over time and stuff. So that's the idea behind the app. Why is Chromium in flashbang mode? I'm assuming you mean light mode. I just never changed it. I actually have a dark mode for the app. Looks like some things on this page are a little bit funky with it. But I haven't turned on dark mode for Chromium. I don't have a strong preference between dark mode and light mode, but one of the things I have noticed is that the font on the actual stream for these light mode pages is like a little bit blurrier. Whereas the font, like on the dark mode, it's like it comes through the video encoding a little better. Ultimate workout procrastination, writing an app for it. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the funny thing is I'm probably not even going to use this app much myself. When I exercise, I don't really track. Part of that is because I don't like the exercise trackers that I have used, though. So maybe with this, I'll actually start tracking my exercises finally. But this has been kind of something that's been sitting around in my head for a while. But also because I'm streaming it, I try not to work on this off stream. That's kind of where the from scratch part comes from. I'm not, I want the whole process to be visible, except unfortunately for like the very beginning part, which I would have liked to have been visible, but I didn't have a YouTube integration set up yet. So that VOD is gone forever. But anyway, so I haven't been working on this off stream. So it's kind of a slow going process at 2 hours a week. You're a mobile dev, but you always feel it's more practical to make mobile apps for things like these. Yeah, I could see that for sure. Especially, I mean, for an app like this, a big part of it is to be mobile friendly, right? And, in my case, like I've been building it in a way where it's not terrible, at least mobile view wise. Like if we go to, whatever page, doesn't really matter. They all kind of work in the mobile view as well as in the desktop view. But my reasoning for that is, I'm assuming this table is not quite right in the mobile view, but most exercises aren't going to have this many parameters anyway. I'm assuming that, people are going to be using it on their phone. They're going to be at the gym or whatever. It's like, it's going to be a phone app. And the fact that it works on the desktop is almost just like, well, might as well. So in that sense, a mobile app would actually make a lot of sense. I have done mobile apps before. I built one back in the day just as like a school assignment in college. And that was like ages ago. So I'm sure the ecosystem's changed a lot, but I don't have a ton of experience with it, which is why I wouldn't want to stream building a mobile app, just because it would just be watching me read the documentation for 2 hours probably for the first like 5 streams. Um, but I'm curious in mobile app development stuff myself as well. I'm curious for building a mobile app, what would you recommend using for like an Android based mobile app? I'm not really into the Apple ecosystem. Not by choice, but Apple, they won't let me create accounts anymore. I had an Apple account years ago and it got hacked. And ever since, it's like whenever I try and create an account, they don't let me. It's kind of weird. It's like they've banned my IP address. I don't know. But anyway, like for an Android app, would it be better to just make the app in like the actual Java ecosystem or use like React Native or something like that? Yeah, React Native. Yeah, I might have to try that sometime. I actually, honestly, I kind of tend to actually prefer the like non-web dev toolkits, like the traditional UI toolkit. I don't really remember a whole lot about the Android one, but something like the Visual Basic UI toolkit. Those are the days, man. Since you're a native dev, you always prefer doing it with Kotlin and the Android SDK. Yeah, I've heard good things about Kotlin. I really like languages with a comprehensive standard library. So like the JavaScript, like the JVM, and all of the standard tooling, and also like robust libraries and stuff on there. It's a really appealing ecosystem. But the actual Java library or Java language, I mean, is sort of like, I understand they've been improving it, so maybe I should take another look, but it always kind of felt not the best. I was sort of spoiled by C# in one of my past jobs, and then Java always kind of felt like a worse C#. Kotlin's standard lib is awesome, and then Android's standard lib is wonderful. That's good. That's a real performance booster. It's one of the things that web development struggles with, which is why we have all these libraries now. But actually, I use Bun as well. Like in it, this app is run by Bun, not Node. And part of that is also because Bun itself comes with a bunch of additional like standard tooling that where it's like you don't just have to pull in third-party libraries for every little thing. It even actually has a built-in web server that I'm not using because I'm using Express, but because it's more like the Bun web server API is more low level and like it doesn't offer routing and middlewares and stuff, but things where, it's got that stuff built in. Obviously, the big thing with Bun is it's got TypeScript built in, so I don't have to actually compile my TypeScript at all. It just runs natively in Bun, which is really nice. But yeah, it's got that nice standard library, sort of that batteries included functionality that I like. Okay, so now I completely forgot what I was doing. I think this should be working, right? We've got the exercise ID. So now it's complaining about body.exercise expected string receive number. That's something I'm going to fix on the server side. There's no reason for that to not just accept a string. So if we go to sets, So the error that's being thrown from is this numeric string schema here. The body.exercise is expected to be a numeric string. Instead, it's a number. So I could do like, is there like an or, any? So it could be either a numeric string or a actual number. Oh, is this not supposed to be an array? Don't really know how that works. Let's take a look at Zod docs here. So we want unions, I guess. I guess I should be using union instead of any. And then we do want the array. Okay. And then now this is complaining because this is possibly a number. And that's the only place that's referenced. String. If it's a string, then we parse it. Otherwise, we just use it. If this was used in more places in this function, I'd pull it out into a variable, but it's not. You've only used Swift UI and you've kind of liked it. Yeah, interesting. I have to assume that's Apple only, right? I've heard good things about Swift. I've always kind of wanted to dig into that as well, but never gotten around to it. Okay, so now let's refresh this. And that worked. And we get a response okay, which means that it should have done the update. If I refresh the page, is that 123 still in there? No, why not? The parameters object is empty. So I forgot to do some data binding in here. Okay, so basically the problem here is this input needs to be bound to the parameter object thing. Like x bind. Let's see here. I'm kind of new to Alpine as well, so learning as I go. I do like to use new tools regularly. I mean, like Pug, for instance, is not really a new tool, but it's the first time I've used it. Instead of just always using the same tool chain, especially for web dev, because it's like there's always new stuff coming out and you don't really know ultimately what's going to be the next big thing or not. So it's like if you try some new things, it's like you can learn about tools that might end up being used in your job and stuff later. Like I remember, for like Angular, React, Knockout, maybe those are the only three, like front-end libraries where I built apps with them as a learning experience, and then later they ended up being used in my job. And that's just like front-end frameworks. There's obviously a lot of other libraries and things that's been the case for as well. Okay, so we're going to do a bind here. I think bind. So what I'm trying to do is get the value of the input into the signal. So I don't know if I'm meant to do that like this. I think so. I'm a bit confused about this example, but whatever. So let's do like X bind. What is the, so what is the, so I'm binding placeholder. So I guess I would do like X bind : value equals, let's just try this first. Okay, yeah, so that's changing the values of these. So what I want to bind the value to then is set dot whatever it is. And in this case, what that is parameter.id. So it'd be like set dot parameter.id. And that would be a string. I think I need to put this in more quotes. This is what I don't like about composing these JavaScript things. But now, let's see if I do that. It's not actually changing the set.parameters parameter.id to this. What is it rendering here? Yeah, set.parameters wait. So it should be returning like this bind should be binding the value object to this wait key of the set parameters, which I think is the format that they should be in. It would be nice if we 2024-05. Let's actually go back here, do something here. So here we can see the format for parameters. It's got like reps, which is actually set to value 123. But when I change this, it's not actually changing this. So I'm trying to figure out if this is a one-way or a two-way data binding, basically. It doesn't really seem to specify. And from what I can see in my testing right now, it kind of seems like it's a one-way data binding. Maybe model is what I actually want. Is this more of a two-way data binding? Yeah. Okay. So X model like that. Let's see what that's like now. So now if I do this, it's got the wait 123 in there. That's good. But we did get an error. Which actually is fine, because if we look at this, the error is to do with the response format, which we can fix separately, but it's not actually an error saving it. So in theory, if I refresh now, that 1, 2, 3 should be in there. The problem is, let's inspect this. The problem is the set, okay, it does have parameters empty for that. Yeah, just kind of having to change a lot of things probably to fix this. But because basically what we're doing is migrating our whole front end from using the patterns that we used for data star library to the patterns that we're going to be using for Alpine library. And, you know, I'm kind of just trying to figure out exactly what those new patterns are going to be, but it might require changing things in a variety of places. So one of the other problems now, if we actually lost that reps thing, but the problem is the parameters are actually stored on the server in object form with units. And then this model is actually just a value. And so we kind of need to decide how we want to handle that, basically. When we're sending this request back to the server, do we want it to be the full object including units, or do we want it to be just the string value like it has been in the past? I kind of want to do it with the full object, is what I'm feeling. So this seems fine, but we need the model to do something. Doesn't look like it has that functionality. We kind of wanted to do like a transformation on update. But without that, I kind of think we actually want to use a different data structure here. So instead of using this set as our data raw, I think we want to construct more of a client-side state object based on that set, if that makes sense. Let's actually, it occurs to me we could do this like this and put the set in here. Pardon me. A bit more readable. And then I might actually just call these like parameters or parameter values. And that would be like an object. And the object would be just empty, I guess, is fine. Oh, I'm missing the brace. Okay. And so then this model is going to be parameter values instead of that set object. And the problem is the parameter values are also going to need to be default constructed. If we go back to an earlier, even earlier day, 329. So these have some values in there. Let me go over here and I'm just going to skip the actual update part because I don't want to keep erasing these things while I'm testing. And so kind of the idea here now is like, say I set this to 1. It's supposed to be doing a thing here. Oh yeah, set is not defined. So it's not sending the request because I forgot to update this bit. Instead of set, this would be like parameter values. Just out of curiosity, that's not going to be quite right in the long run, but 1, 2, 3. So we're sending just that weight. And it's not sending any of the others. It's a bit annoying. Okay, well, let's just do it this way. I'm going to have the set be the actual set object here. And what we're going to send back is just going to be that same object, and we're going to have to manage these values ourselves. So like this is going to be the value on there, if that makes sense. So like for each of these parameters, usually it has like a value, which is the number, and then it also has a unit, which, you know, for weight could be like pounds, kilograms. For distance, it could be miles or kilometers. And so we're accessing the actual value property on that instead of anything else. But now, what if that is 0 and I try to set it to something? Does that work? I wonder. So here I just updated the weight, but the weight didn't show up in the list. So it's not able to two-way data bind to the subproperty. So we might actually need to use two different data structures here. So there's the set, and then we're also going to have a values object, let's say. And so this is going to actually be looking at the values object. And we're going to need to synchronize these with some transformation happening along the way, is kind of what I'm thinking. What is this model ubble? I wonder if this is... Oh no, that's not what I want. For, no. Transition, no. Effect. Maybe. Let's just think about this. So X effect or really X data, because the data can be reactive. So this could maybe be something like values could be set.parameters.map reduce, I guess. And before I forget, pass in the default value. So we're building an object, and instead of S, I'll call that P for parameter. where each parameter ID is assigned to, or no, it's kind of complicated. I bet I bet Pug is going to complain to me for this. Let's see. So here we're going to assign like k is equal to, let's say, v dot value or v dot min, because min is used for duration and value is used for everything else. At some point I might want to make that more consistent, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, so let's see what we're getting for that now. So here we have values. Oh, right, that has to be in the brackets. That seems fine. And this is actually going to need to not be executed on the server side. I'm going to need another thing. Let's put it here. Dot cell, is that about right? No, that's too let's see. Next data. We've got values is something like that. And I'll format this better if it seems like it's working. But the idea is we first reassign this set data element based on this object that's constructed on the server and embedded into the JavaScript. And then in this other one, we're actually iterating over all those parameters to construct a values object. What are we complaining about here? Oh, two parameters at the same name. Yeah. Okay, fine. I'll just put it here for the moment, see what that looks like. Proving to be a little more complicated than I was hoping. So now we've got here, values is all that stuff. Let's actually put that here. We can do another div and then put everything underneath that. And then down here, like we should be able to bind this to values parameter ID, and that should make those things show up. Now it's there's some weirdness going on here, which makes sense if I get rid of that. Because again, we're just kind of experimenting here. I'm not expecting this to be like the final HTML. The problem here is because we added this div, it's causing the grid renderer to mess up. But we can fix that by removing the div once we figure out what we want to do. So another thing I want to see is like if I just put in like X text is values. Values assisted. Okay, so it actually is getting those values in, which is good to see. Probably this X data piece can move up here. And then this other X data piece can move here for now. And then we can get rid of this div again. I think that should work. I'm not entirely sure if this makes sense. Okay, so now we're sending set, but we also want to send parameters as values, which makes me think maybe I should just call that parameters. Like that. And so this would be parameters. This would be parameters. Okay. Let's see what that does now. So if I change one of these to 1, 2, 3, look at the network. So now we have all of the parameters, including the weight one that we just sent. Now that one is a string, which makes sense. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. But I think it shouldn't be. So let's just assume it's not, and we can test it out. Okay, so now we can actually uncomment this and give it a shot what we were doing here. So now if I set this to, say, 321, it makes the request. We get this error, which we can ignore because that's to do with the response handling. If we refresh the page, okay, it didn't actually work, did it? 321. Parameters, weight, 321. I mean, that seems right. So what is the problem then? So the parameters is going to be built with this build set parameters function, accepting these parameters in the body, which should be those key value pairs. Let's actually look at this function and see. So it's going through each parameter. Converting it to a number, doing the thing. I mean, it looks like it's doing the right things. Let's do a quick log. Parameters in body. Log, okay, so parameters in body is actually an empty object, despite the fact that the body has a parameters array. What? What about rec.body? Oops. What is in here? Sign me back in. Not sure why it signs me out for some reason. Okay, so the request has parameters. Oh, okay. So this is actually expecting those parameters to come in, not in the parameters subobject for some reason. or I shouldn't say for some reason, it's because that's how the previous data star library worked, where it would send all of the signals as like a flat object, all of the signals in that form. Now it's sort of using this more of a structured thing. Although it doesn't have to, so, but it probably should. I mean, we're kind of getting closer to having more of a normalized sort of JSON formatted API instead of the previous one, which was based more on sort of how HTML forms work. This one's sort of more on like sending JavaScript objects or JSON objects back and forth. I mean, parameters. I guess this would be like z.object. Yep. Okay, so now let's try it again. Okay, so now it's doing the thing. And it's building the parameters. And probably we could update this and should update it in a variety of ways, but that should work now. If I refresh, I should have the 1, 2, 3. If I go over here, set 3, 2, 1, refresh. Okay, so that didn't work for some reason. Expected string received number. Okay, so it's complaining about if we go back over here, this should really be wrapped in a toString or something like that. So now if I do a 3, 2, 1 here, it works. And if I refresh, it works. Sort of odd. Another option would be if instead of using this, well, I don't know. There's probably a better way, but I'm no Alpine expert, so this is what I'm going to stick with because it works for me. And the whole point of doing all of these changes is so that now when there is an error, which we luckily have a situation set up to simulate already, apparently, you get this error thing. This is something that was difficult to do before. But now this is actually possible in this main function for us to catch errors and log them here. The problem, the reason that it's throwing an error even though that request worked is because it's trying to JSON parse the response. But the controller is just responding with an OK because we're just using send status. So it's not actually returning anything JSON. Kind of not the best. If we actually look at this thing here, like the request header is technically saying, it accepts any content type. So the fact that the response is actually a text plain content type is not really violating what the client is asking for. But our client really sort of wants us to be returning JSON. Like we're now writing this JavaScript code, assuming that we're going to be getting JSON responses. We don't necessarily have to do that. Like this could just not parse the JSON response, or that could be in a separate try catch, where if it fails, it just returns an empty string or something, a null. But it might be a good idea to actually just start returning JSON. So I don't know if there's a convenient way to just do that automatically, but I would do something like this, .send or res.status .send just to use a simple example. Now, if we change one of these things, we're not going to see an error because we're actually getting back a JSON response, even though it's not telling us anything. Okay. So that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I'm just thinking a little bit here. Okay. So I think that makes sense. And let's actually just go ahead and update the rest of the today page to use these new Alpine things instead of the old things. So what is involved with that? First of all, we can get rid of this catch. Okay, so this model and debounce logic is going to be the same here. I feel like, actually, before I dig into this too much, though, we're going to have a bit of a problem. The value, what's the best way to illustrate this? So here we have 1, 2, 3 pounds, right? Now I'm going to go into my settings page and I'm going to convert my weight unit to kilograms. And then I'm going to go back and refresh. Now it's actually saying 1, 2, 3 kilograms. This is not right. It should be, and if we actually look at the set here, we can see weight, unit, pound, value 1, 2, 3. So it even says in there that the unit is pound, but we're actually rendering it as 1, 2, 3 kilograms. And the problem there is we're not actually converting the value to the appropriate unit in this function here. And that is an interesting problem to have, because we've defined a function that we can use to convert those values, but we've defined it on the server. So it can't be done in this reactive block. So really, maybe this could be actually on the server too, I wonder. Like if we do this, set parameters reduce. Let's see what that does just for starters here. So now under here, this should be under the form. Where's the form? So it doesn't actually have that on it anymore. Object.entry set.parameters .reduce. Is this going to need to be JSON.stringified again, I guess? Something bizarre like that. Okay, it's still not showing up. let's see, if I just get rid of this for a moment and just do an empty object, that shows up, right? No, it doesn't. Okay, so I'm looking at the wrong form. It's actually these forms. Okay. We will figure it out. Okay, so now the form has those parameters in there, and that's being done on the server side, for which reason I can actually get rid of this thing, I think, and use a, well, let's just see here. We go look at the diff, look at what we had before. This convert unit function is what we're going to want to use. Something like that. But I feel like I'm really complicating the logic in this view more than I would like. Okay, let's just bite the bullet here and put some more logic in the UI. So we're going to say, here we've got our parameter values. And we could say like const value equals, also get rid of these parentheses so we can actually write our code. And this param value thing is just going to be v. Because that's this parameter value. So v, convert unit to unit, which we got to define that as well. We've got these things where it's like var unit. Pug doesn't let you use const, by the way. That's why I got to switch that to a var. Var unit, default unit. And then value is that. And then we would say like if value, then mk equals value, return m. Okay, so now if I refresh this, we get a complaint, parameter.datatype. So parameter, so we don't know the parameter yet here. We know the parameter ID because that's k, which maybe I'll just call that ID just to make it a little bit more obvious. So certainly we can look up that value. It's kind of awkward, though. I don't know. I feel like I'm straying from the path of the light here, but we're just going to do it. So the parameter data type is going to come from the parameter, which we're going to get from all parameters dot find, where p.id equals ID. All parameters. Oh, it's not a function. Okay. So now you see these values are actually converted to kilograms. So what we have in the set is unit pound value 123. What we have in the value is 55.8. Now, if I change this to 60, what we actually get sent across now is, 60. If I refresh this, it's still 60. And if I change this back to pounds and refresh, now it's, whatever 60 kilograms is in pounds. But if we actually look at the set here, we can see the unit is in kilograms. So I don't know if that makes sense, but basically the reason we were having that problem is the values in the database have an attached unit, but that attached unit doesn't necessarily match the value that the user expects to see that rendered as if they've recently changed their selected unit. So we have to convert it on the fly. But then as soon as they save it with the new unit, then the value in the database is going to be labeled with the new unit instead of the old unit. Okay. So that's kind of a pain. But so we did that. It's doing this for all of the different parameters. Now, not all of the parameters actually have a unit. So we're probably going to need, I don't remember how this convert unit function works, but we're probably going to need to make sure to avoid calling that. Yeah, because otherwise it'll throw an error for non-unitified things here. So basically, like if not unit, then well, let's do it this way. If unit, then do this. Otherwise, MID equals V dot value or V dot minutes. Looks like we've got a spammer in the chat. Just gonna hit them with a ban. Okay, so that's a thing. Yeah, it's feels weird. I feel like there must be a better way here, but for now we're just doing it how we're doing it. Okay, so down here the idea is we're doing this. We're going to do the same thing, basically exactly the same thing, I think, for most of these other inputs here as well. And intensity is going to be the same thing. Okay, so that's fine. So for these other things where we're using the select mixin, we're going to need to make a new select mixin. Let's do select alpine. So here, name really, a lot of these things actually we might not even need. So data on change becomes really it would be like X on change, right? Data signals would be more like X data So let's do it this way. So X model, first of all, I can type, right? Okay. So what do we actually want here? So we want to have this select value be modeled with this signal because we need a two-way data binding on what is selected. If I actually look at the model docs here, for select, yeah, it's just as simple as that. Okay. And just going to always assume that there's a signal it's being bound to. The data, I don't know if we really need that at all. I'm not sure. Let's just take it out. And we can add it if we need it. Okay. And then the values, this stuff should be fine, maybe, kind of, hopefully. Okay. So now if we look at one of these today pages, so this select intensity, first parameter name, second parameter signal name, this is going to be this. I guess like that. The default value doesn't get specified. There is no such thing. Let's actually get this out of here altogether and out of here, and we can re-add that if we need it. The on change is going to be this. And then the all intensities, that's constructing the set of values. That's still good. Okay. So, lovely. Just a nice blank error. Oh. Yes. Okay. So now our intensity should be theoretically working. If I switch this to low, that gets sent off. Hello? Okay, intensity low. If I refresh the page here, intensity does not have units. I know that much. Does this default unit function throw an error if the thing... Where is that function? Default unit. And where is this used? Bunch of places where we already know what the parameter is. So kind of what I'm thinking here is this default unit thing actually, instead of throwing an error, I would rather it return null. But is that going to make a lot of these other types fail is the question. It's probably going to have some effects. Like if we look over here now, well, it is being as any'd for some reason. Yeah, we're getting some errors where it's like, we're not sure if this is really a unit or not. Just going to do this. Anyway, kind of the reason that we don't want it to return an error is so that in the today page or anywhere we want to, we can tell whether or not the parameter data type is one that has a unit associated with it by calling the default unit function on it instead of needing to use a separate function for that. Is kind of what I was thinking anyway. I don't know. What are our problems here? A couple more places where like this just has to be exclamation marked. I don't know. More things we can refine in the future. But for now, that should get this working, I think. Yeah, so now that's like low, medium. It stays on medium. Good to see. If I go back to a previous day and then back to today. Cool. So then there's these as well, like 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Now if I refresh, which of those work? All of them work. Okay, love to see that. If I actually look at the object here, we can see parameters has reps, just a value, weight with unit pounds, assisted unit pounds, distance, unit kilometers, duration minutes, and intensity value medium. If I go over here, it should be pounds, kilometers. Yep. Okay. Okay, so that part is working. We still have to do the actual exercise ID for the set itself too, though, which is a bit of a special case in comparison to these other parameters. So let's go ahead and, what if I change that to that? Does that, yeah, that's not, Okay, I'm going to worry about that later. But what we need to support is this as well, that drop down, which is handled up here. So we're going to do, let's do this properly. Basically exactly the same thing, but instead of sending what are all these parameters for? Name. Yeah, so the name we actually don't even need. Let's just take that out. For the select alpine, we don't need a name. We just need the value that it's bound to, which in this case is set.exercise.id, but actually in a string. And that's it for that. But we're also going to need to update this data show thing. But let's just see this part here. So set.exercise.id is going to be rebound based on, and here we're actually assigning set with the exercise ID as a thing. So it actually would just be like this, set.exercise. And exercises. Okay, yes. So now, if I switch this to test, it makes a request to the backend with exercise 26. which it was previously exercise 25. You see there 25. So it is changing it. And what is the backend complaining about here? Reps, expected string received number, duration, expected string received number. Why are those numbers? Oh, because it's not going through convert unit. So this would actually, I had this before, but I need to re-add it. There needs to be a toString here, I think is what that was telling me. Now if I switch this to test, that works. And if I refresh the page here, that works. But now we have another thing to fix. So let's look at our manage exercises for test. It doesn't have any of the parameters selected. So that should actually be hiding all of these inputs or selects or whatever they might happen to be. That logic is done with this data show thing. So this is using data star. We're switching to Alpine. So we need to update this to use Alpine instead. So in order to do that, I think we use if. Is that right? Toggling elements on a page. Oh, that's interesting. I'm actually just going to use show. X show. We don't need to make the element disappear. We just need to toggle its visibility. And this is going to be pretty similar in Alpine, except this is going to be just set.exercise. And this exercises object is going to need to be populated. So up here, we're doing that for Alpine. We're going to need to switch that for, or we're doing it for data star. We're going to need to switch it for Alpine. So xData equals JSON.stringify exercises, right? That should do it. And then down here, that's referencing exercises. So now if we refresh the page, those things are all gone. If we switch it to dumbbell curl, they're supposed to all come back, but they're not, which is telling me that something about this logic isn't working. So one thing is I want to make sure I'm actually just going to include this here as well for now. I don't know if it's like we're getting all these errors. I don't know. I'm just not going to worry about that, I guess. But the question is, why aren't these things hiding? So like if I do like X, or why are they hiding, I guess, when they shouldn't be? X text exercises and get rid of that. Didn't work at all. If I just change that to true. Okay, so now they are being shown. Okay. This I might actually just have be set. Let's do something here. if I do that as set, then I don't need to do this exercises.find business because we already have just set.exercise. Okay, and in that case, we don't need this up here either. The problem with that now is when we actually make the requests, the exercise.id is going to be like set.exercise is going to be an object now. So I could like fix that here, like ID or exercise set.exercise.id and parameters. And really, we don't even need to send any of the rest of the stuff from the set. And really this now that I'm thinking about it, can actually be done client side as well, set.id, like that. Okay. So now, network, switch. So what is it sending off? Just the parameters object and that's it. No, nothing else. JSON.stringify set. So I mean the set should be here, right? Yeah. And the parameters are an empty object. That seems fine. Why isn't the set.exercise.id coming through though? What if I do x effect console.log set? That. Is that this? I guess that makes sense. I don't know. Set. It's labeled as a proxy object, probably because that's how the reactivity is being handled here. So it seems like Alpine is probably wrapping the underlying object in a proxy, which is then going to have those like getter and setter things to then update any dependencies of that data when the data changes. But that seems fine. I mean, it's what I would have expected. So then why is this not setting it to set.exercise.id? That's 25. That's what I would think. What am I missing here? This is actually changing things, right? Like if I do that and do this, it is, yeah, it's doing stuff. It's just not including this exercise in here. What if I just set that to 1, 2, 3? So it includes that now. What if I do set.exercise? Okay, so that works. Oh, I see. So the problem is this. That was the problem, I think. Confusing stuff. So now if I switch it to test, it should send the exercise ID. If I switch it back to dumbbell curl, it should send the exercise ID. Yeah. Okay, so that's fine, kind of, but kind of not, because we're just mutating the ID of that exercise, but all of the other values of that exercise are not the right ones. So the way we actually had it is probably going to be better. Set exercise set.exercise.id. If I actually do it like that, get rid of this X effect. And this is just set.exercise. Then this works, but then down here, this is not going to work. So kind of the problem with that other approach I was realizing is we're not actually changing this set.exercise value at all. So we're going to need to do something more like this again. Just going back and forth, trying to find something that seems like it'll work here. And we already defined our exercises up here. Okay, so I did get rid of that. X data. JSON.stringify exercises. And this is put into an object. Okay. v.id equals set.exercise. Yeah. Okay, so now we're kind of back to where we were. So these things are working, but this show is not quite working. And I kind of want to do, let's do another like X effect console.log exercises. Exercises is not defined. It should be defined up here, though. Oh, that's not in the tree or whatever. It's got to be defined here. Okay, now it's defined, and now that's actually working. And I don't need that effect anymore. Okay. So now it's working where it's, dynamically showing only the fields that we actually need for this given exercise. And if I switch it back to test and refresh, it's still test. If I switch it here and refresh, it's still here. If I put in some values in every column and refresh, they're all still in there. Okay. Okay, so far, so good. But we still have a lot of changes to do in this page. This is like one of the more complicated pages. Maybe I should have started with something simpler, but that's okay. Oh, we basically are trying to get rid of all of these data attributes everywhere. So like this one is like data on click, blah, 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 expanded. Really, we can do X click set expanded set.id equals, I mean, so what we're doing here is like toggling this value. And we're going to need to define that set expanded thing. So that could be, actually, let's just do it here. X data expanded. And we don't even need to use the set business because we can actually scope these things with Alpine. That was one of the interesting things with Data Star is it's like you define your signal anywhere on the page, and then that is available in scope anywhere else on the page, even in like a totally unrelated HTML element, which is kind of useful in sometimes, but also kind of not. Whereas with Alpine, the data declaration just defines something within scope of the children of that element, like that element and its children. So in this case, we could actually just call this expanded, or like history expanded false. And then this can just toggle that. We don't need to actually do the set ID stuff. We don't need to maintain some global state object. We can just define this little local Boolean variable. But we do need this to be at a high enough level to be used down here, I guess. So that would be like up here. And so then this would be like X show, history expanded. And get rid of the data signals declaration. And so now let's see if that bit works now. So if I click on this, it's not expanding the thing. I'm probably doing some syntax wrong. Yeah, this should be X on. Okay, so now click on it. So now we can expand and collapse that chunk again. Very nice. Also, I can get rid of this form business and change this form into just a plain old div, which is nice. Minimize the number of annoying forms. The only reason we had those forms, by the way, as a reminder, is because of the Data Star like fetch wrapper tool that used those forms to determine what signals to send because it didn't have scoping and stuff. Okay, so that's fine. So now here we're going to need to do something kind of similar to what we have up here. So there's this X show. It's basically this exact same thing down here. And here. And yeah, so now refresh this. So now if I click on this, it shows all of those. If I switch to test, they're all gone. Yeah, like no columns. Maybe like if I go manage exercises here, test, let's say we just want weight. Now, if I refresh this and click on that, it just shows the weight. Yeah, so that logic is working. Cool. Yes. What else is using data in here? Data dash. So there's some data on click things. It's actually a fair number of things left still, but that's fine. So this one is the notification. This is a pretty simple one. Onboarding notification. And so this, we would have like an X data onboarding notification, false, right? What was it before? Oh, so before it had it as true. Right, that makes sense. This should be true. And then, when they click this, it's going to set that back to false. So this is like X on click. And we can test that in a minute here, but that one's a little annoying to test because I have to delete all my exercises. Actually, we could just do like this real fast. So now this is the thing. And if I click X, it goes away. Cool. This data ID thing here is actually not, I don't know what that's even used for. Is that used for anything? I feel like that's not used for anything. Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it's used for this. The sortable stuff. Right. Okay. So we need that data ID in there for the sortable API still. That's fine. What other datas do we have left here? Data signals exercises that we shouldn't need anymore. Data on change. This would be X on change. That doesn't need to change other than that, except for this. Okay, so what is if we look at on, how do I reference the event object? Alpine's magic $event property. Okay, so this would be $event. Or no, event, yes. Okay. So that's telling me now that if I change this, say to 11, it's gonna, send me to that page. 2024. Yeah, so it's updating the URL properly based on that. Seems fine. Okay, so we got rid of all the data stuff. The last thing is the control. So everywhere we have a plus select, we're going to need to replace it with select Alpine. So like in this case, select Alpine, get rid of the first parameter, get rid of the default value parameter. This one is just going to be called new set exercise. And exercise, new set exercise, I guess. So this is going to do underscore set dot fetch post to sets with this new exercise ID and also these other things. So I was previously using a form with DataStar to pass these fields through, but now we're just going to put them right into JavaScript. So like date is going to be date. And order is going to be the order. Next set order. And then these can go away. This is no longer a form. That can go away. Like that. Okay. New set exercise is not defined. How does this work again? So we've got our mixin model, signal name, on change. 。 So, I mean, that kind of works, but we kind of also need like this X data, new set exercise, null or something, right? Okay, so now there's no error. And then we select one of these. And what happens? The date's wrong. The exercise is right. The order is right. Oh, this probably have to be in quotes. At least the date. Okay, add. Now what? So now it worked, but we got that okay response again. So let's look at our, because this is a different route. Post/sets. So here's another place where we're going to want to do this Rails.sendStatus.send okay thing. And yeah. So the other thing is, I feel like the way I had that before, it refreshed the page after you added. Yeah, it did this reload afterwards, which is sort of a workaround to actually get the new set to appear. I'm sure there's better ways to do that as well, but for now I'm just going to do the same thing. So like add a dot then. Like that. So now if I add something, say I add test, or say I add dumbbell curl, that's fine. And this kind of needs an empty thing on there as well. Dot concat exercises. And then this could be like new set exercise. And so I want it to only actually run that if new set exercise is true. So if I do this, it creates a new one. If I just switch it back to the empty one, it shouldn't do anything. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Seems fine. I guess it's never going to be in any state other than having the first one selected because it automatically reloads the page. But anyway, so we can add sets. We should be able to update all of these values here in different places. And refresh, and they should all still be there. Yeah, looks good. And if I change this and refresh, it's still there. Okay. You know, I mean, it's looking okay functionally. And the nice thing now is like, say we have in this post sets ID thing, you know, say we like throw new error, or let's do it this way. Say we go into the Zod thing and we say, oh, you know, there's also a thing where you're going to have to pass in foo. And without that, the request is going to fail. So now if I do something here, I get this message, hey, an unknown error has occurred. Now, what I actually expected to see was the error itself. If we look at this, the error message is well, first of all, let's get rid of that console log and this console log. Oh, so I haven't actually set that here. So this would be like message is something. what is the error? So the error just says bad request. It doesn't really let me see. Does it let me see the request or the response in the error itself? No. Oh, so that's coming from here, really. So actually, we would say like, if try error resp equals, oh wait, resp.json, error message equals error resp.error message. If we look at like what the backend was returning, it has this error message property on it. And currently this is an object, but I want the backend to actually return this as a string. So I can fix that on the backend. But on the front end here, basically we're just going to take whatever's in this error message and log that. So in order to do that, we have to parse it here. And so if we can't parse it, or if it doesn't have this property, oops, then we're going to return like a generic error. Otherwise, we're going to return the error message. So let's do like let error message equals an unknown error has occurred. And then this would be not another declaration. We're assigning to the existing error message variable. If we catch an error, we literally don't do anything here. And then we would be like throw new error message. And then down here, we would be like message is e.message. I wonder if that's going to work. This would be e.message. Okay. What do we see now? Uncut reference error, E is not defined. So it's not getting into the evaluate, which is kind of annoying. But it did get to the point of logging the error, right? Yeah. Let's do like .toString here, just in case it's not a string. Like this is currently not a string. So now that will be converted to a string. I guess that was happening anyway. But the problem is that E is not present in this Alpine expression. It's not inheriting that from the current scope. So like, I'm just going to try something weird here. Does this happen to fix it? No. Okay. How can I see the docs for alpine.expression? Or alpine.evaluate, I mean. Alpine.evaluate. So it's just body, expression, and extras. But what are the extras? The problem with this evaluate thing is it's kind of a it's kind of a private API. Like I don't know if there's a way to actually do the thing I'm trying to do without using evaluate. Custom magics. Ooh. Okay. And that's using Alpine. I sort of like this actually, custom magics. And where's this evaluate later coming from? Alpine.directive. Okay, so it's creating custom directives. But I don't really need that. Extending. Not entirely sure. But I do like the idea of a custom magic. So I might actually just do that here too. So in theory, do custom magics have to be done before you do the start? I wonder. It's probably a good idea. Alpine.magic fetch. And then that is going to be this whole set fetch function. Right? This would be async function set fetch. Right? And then like here, instead of all these places where I've got like underscore set.fetch, I could do like $fetch. Like that, right? So let's try that. Refresh this, switch this. $fetch is not a function. Okay. Why not though? Alpine.magic fetch. Oh, it's got to return another function. Okay. Yes, like that. Okay, so now if I switch this, now that part works. So I can use that nice $fetch thing. So if I do like underscore set dot fetch, can be replaced with $fetch. But that didn't really solve our problem, which is how do we get this E into the thing we're evaluating here? Let's actually look at the Alpine code maybe real fast. If I search this for evaluate, this one. No, that's not the right thing. I don't need resize. I just want like the core one. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of results here. I guess this is probably it. Evaluate element expression. with extras. So what does evaluate later do? My goodness. There's a lot of chains of functions calling functions here. Or like functions defining functions and returning functions. I wonder what the point of all that is. Make it more extensible. But what are these extras going into? They're going into the function that's being returned by evaluate later. So L expression, null L expression evaluator, generate evaluator from string. Scope data stack. So the data stack I'm trying to figure out like what are these extras even used for? What is extras? It's the second value passed into the function that's returned after evaluate later. So the evaluator function returns something. It's returning this. So try catch is the function here. L expression evaluator. And it's being bound to have L expression evaluator, and then it's going to have two additional things in there. So let's take a look at what that function does. Utils, error, try catch, returns callback. Okay, so the callback here is expression. Or is it evaluator? I don't know. It is annoyingly confusing to figure that out. But if I do this as like, I mean, E. So we know that this doesn't work. So like error set to E, and then like error.message. You going. Yeah, so we get an error. Error is undefined. If I put it with $1 beforehand, now what? Still not defined. If I look at $data.error, now what? Can I read property of undefined reading message? So the error is not being put on the data object. I guess that makes sense because if it was, then this would work too. What if I do that? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, still doesn't work. I mean, there's got to be a way to do it. There's got to be a way to do it. Evaluate expressions. It just says like, is there, don't know. So this, first of all, so for this custom magic here, we've got the element and then the alpine object element. And so the alpine global object that's now being used here. That should still not work, right? Right. Let's see. Evaluate. I'm kind of looking for use cases or like usages of evaluate here. The other thing is, it seems like we could actually use evaluate later, maybe. I don't know if that really matters. Did that fix it? No, it just didn't. It didn't fix it. It just didn't do anything. Because we didn't get the error pop up or anything, right? Like if I do this like something that I know doesn't exist. Do that. No error. Yeah. So evaluate later is not running it until a certain point, presumably. But I don't know when that later is. Who would have thought this would be so difficult? Oh, well, okay. I just had a weird thought. We could just inject it right into this string instead of relying on a scoped variable. This could be like e.message. This is bizarre. Let's do double quotes, I guess. Pretty bizarre. Hopefully it doesn't cause problems. But now that actually works. And, you know, we're getting object because the error message we're getting back isn't an object, which we need to fix. So let's adjust that. Util, controller method. So down here, this basically, when we're sending back JSON, the error message should be from error E. Looks like that's what we're doing. So why is it returning this whole thing? Let's see. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. So this from error function is not doing what I expected it to do. Let's see. So this is coming from Zod validation error. Let's take a look at that now. So from error E, and then it has to be converted with a .to string to get a string. Huh. So now what do we get back? Okay, a string. Okay, so then that string is going to go here. Now, why didn't that happen? Because of this stupid escaping business. Okay. Finally, we've got something kind of working here for actually logging these error messages. So it's telling us, hey, you know, forgot by now, but we added this foo thing here, and that failing is giving us an error, and we can actually see what that error is on the client as the user. And then if I refresh the page, you know, it doesn't, the data didn't get saved. Okay, so let's get rid of that foo thing. Let's stage these Alpine changes. Just this one, add Alpine.js. Simple thing. And I would also stage maybe this part and this part. Basically, this is like the add Alpine thing. And stage this part. And this part. Oops. Okay, so this is add Alpine.js. Cool. So now we're going to add this business here, which is add Alpine.js error store and fetch handler. And we're going to include this here as well, because this is also part of that error store to actually render that thingy. This, that we can just get rid of. This page we'll worry about in a minute. Okay. So here we're going to do just this one change here is I'm going to make its own commit for that as well, like fix error message not being a string. Because we were kind of assuming that that was going to be a string value. We also have let's see, these underscore set things. So instead of stuff being like exercise tracker dot whatever, it's like set dot whatever. Also, this looks like it got messed up somehow. Because that should have been, I don't know why it's like adding that line. That line got accidentally deleted. I could clean that up, but I won't. It's just like one of these earlier commits probably accidentally deleted that line of code when I was staging chunks. Anyway, so here's another set chunk to stage. And then probably here there were some as well. Were there any? If I search for exercise tracker. Yeah, that one. Okay, so let's stage that chunk. Okay, so this one is rename export from main.js to underscore set. And then we've got add the select Alpine thing and update the today page to use Alpine instead of data star. And part of that as well is also updating these backend routes. I think all of these are part of that change. And this default units thing might as well be part of that change too. And what was the other thing down here? More exclamation points. Okay. Okay. So we've updated the today page. That's by far the most complicated page. So getting that switched off of Alpine switched on to Alpine feels pretty good. And I feel like I'm not saying that the new approach is perfect, but it feels like Alpine's got a lot more potential here and flexibility than Datastar, at least without digging into reading the code to understand how to do things. One last thing. I'm way over time for the week, but one last thing I want to do here is fix this problem. So if I switch this to nothing, the intensity is sent as an empty object. Is that okay? Maybe that's actually just fine. If I switch it to low, reload, that works. If I switch it to an empty object and reload, that also works. And if I look at the historical data, let's see, that one is 411. Interesting that's not showing up on the list here for some reason. Oh, 4/11/2024. Why? Yeah, because I have this limited to a year. If we do all-time look back, now it'll show up. So 4/11/2024, all of them don't have intensity. If I set it on one of them, refresh, then it's set properly. If I unset it, it goes away. Okay. Okay, that actually works fine, it seems like. So we'll just leave that as is. And go ahead and wrap up here. So let's do a push. And that'll be it. Thanks, y'all. See you next week.